Welcome to Alcott Stories. Hey there, story lovers. Whether you're a long-time viewer or a brand new guest, welcome to Alcott Stories, where emotions come alive and every story takes you on a thrilling journey. Here, we bring you heart-touching love tales, intense betrayals, passionate romances, and jaw-dropping twists that will keep you hooked from start to finish. To all our amazing returning viewers, thank you for being part of our journey. Your love and support make this channel what it is today. And to our new viewers, you're in for a treat. If you love unforgettable stories filled with drama, romance, and emotions that touch the soul, hit that subscribe button now and become part of the Alcott Stories family. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your favorite moments. Your support helps us create more incredible stories just for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into another unforgettable tale. The evening was crisp, the sky painted in hues of soft lavender as the city lights flickered to life. The towering glass walls of the Grand Avenue Mall reflected the vibrant energy of New York, a place where luxury and ordinary life intertwined seamlessly. Alexander Carter, a self-made billionaire at just 30, stepped out of his sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, his polished shoes clicking against the marble pavement. His presence commanded attention. His sharp blue eyes, chiseled jawline, and neatly styled brown hair made heads turn effortlessly. But tonight, he wasn't in the mood for admirers. The weight of his corporate empire rested on his shoulders. The endless board meetings, profit margins, and strategic decisions drained him. He needed a moment to breathe, to exist outside the rigid walls of business negotiations and wealth. As he walked into the high-end boutique section of the mall, the scent of fresh leather and expensive colognes filled the air. He strolled past the glimmering displays of Rolex, Gucci, and Versace, his mind elsewhere, until he saw her. Across the boutique aisle, a woman stood in front of a perfume counter, examining a bottle with delicate fingers. The golden lights above reflected off her luminous brown skin, accentuating the elegant curve of her neck. Her dark, curly hair cascaded down her back in soft waves, and when she turned slightly, her full lips curled into a gentle smile at something the sales associate said. Alexander froze. Something about her stirred him in a way he hadn't felt in years, or perhaps ever. His heart thudded. Not from nerves, he was a man who conquered business empires after all, but from a rare feeling of intrigue and curiosity. He had met countless beautiful women, models, heiresses, actresses, but none of them had ever captured him like this. There was something effortlessly enchanting about her, something beyond physical beauty. Maya Thompson, oblivious to his intense gaze, lifted the perfume bottle to her wrist and inhaled. The floral and musky scent brought a soft smile to her lips. Alexander, unable to stop himself, walked toward her, drawn in by an invisible force. As he approached, Maya turned her head slightly, and their eyes met. A slow electricity crackled between them, an unspoken moment of recognition, as if their souls had whispered to each other before their lips even parted. Her eyes, deep, soulful, and warm like rich espresso, locked onto his icy blue ones. For a split second, the bustling world around them faded. The voices, the footsteps, the murmurs of transactions, all blurred into the background. Alexander, always confident, found himself hesitating. He wanted to say something clever, something that would make her smile again, but for the first time in years, words felt insufficient. Maya, equally surprised by her own reaction, felt her heart skip a beat. The man standing before her wasn't just attractive, he was mesmerizing. The sharp angles of his jaw, the perfect fit of his navy blue tailored suit, and the way he carried himself with effortless dominance. It was a dangerous combination. But it was his eyes that held her still. There was something behind them, something deep, something unreadable. He wasn't just staring at her beauty. He was looking at her as if she was a mystery he desperately wanted to unravel. Maya, always graceful, cleared her throat and smiled softly. "Do you always stare at strangers like that, or am I just lucky?" Alexander's lips curled into a smirk. "Only when they make the entire room disappear." A soft blush warmed her cheeks' edges and she laughed, the sound delicate yet rich, like silk brushing against bare skin. He wanted to hear that sound again. "So do you always charm women in malls?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled, tucking his hands into his pockets. "I don't usually meet women worth charming." Maya's smile deepened. "And yet, here you are. A game of words, a dance of glances, a chemistry so palpable it could set the entire boutique on fire." The sales associate returned, interrupting their moment. "Would you like to purchase the perfume, miss?" Maya blinked, momentarily distracted. She nodded, reaching for her purse. Before she could grab her wallet, Alexander handed his black titanium credit card to the cashier. Maya's eyes widened. "Excuse me, I don't recall asking you to buy me anything." Alexander leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Then consider it an invitation." Maya tilted her head, intrigued. "An invitation for what?" He smirked. "To let me walk you out of here and see where the night takes us." She could have refused. She could have said she wasn't interested, walked away, and let him become just another stranger in a crowded city. But something inside her whispered otherwise. A dangerous kind of thrill danced in her veins. "All right, Mr. Mysterious, let's see where this leads." And with that, their journey began. One that would soon spiral into a love so intense, so passionate, yet so heartbreakingly tragic. Fate had played its card. The first move was made. And neither of them had any idea just how much this one encounter would change their lives forever. Her laughter was soft, like the delicate notes of a love song playing on a vinyl record. Alexander leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. "I don't remember the last time I enjoyed a conversation this much," he admitted, his voice smooth like aged whiskey. Maya tilted her head, a teasing smile curling her lips. "Are you saying you usually spend your nights bored?" "Not bored," he said, swirling his coffee, "just not this captivated." Heat curled in Maya's stomach, an unfamiliar flutter spreading through her chest. She had met men before, handsome ones, charming ones, but none had looked at her like Alexander did. He looked at her as if he was discovering something rare, something worth treasuring. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, like two souls that had always known each other. They spoke of childhood dreams, secret fears, and the places they longed to visit. With each passing moment, the air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken. Alexander reached across the table, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. A jolt of electricity shot through her, stealing her breath. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice husky, filled with a promise of something deeper. Maya's lips parted slightly, her heartbeat quickening. The tension between them was undeniable, a magnetic pull neither could resist. She didn't ask where they were going. She simply nodded, letting him lead her into the unknown. The night air was crisp as they stepped outside, the city lights glowing like scattered diamonds. A sleek black Rolls-Royce awaited them, and Alexander opened the door for her. As they slid into the plush leather seats, silence filled the space, heavy, expectant. Maya stole a glance at him, his strong jawline illuminated by the streetlights. Without thinking, she reached out, tracing a light finger along the back of his hand. He turned to her, his eyes darkening with intensity. The driver started the car, but neither of them paid attention to where they were headed. The only destination that mattered was each other. The Grand Royal Hotel loomed ahead, its towering structure shimmering in the night. Alexander stepped out first, then extended his hand toward Maya. She placed her palm against his, their fingers intertwining as he led her inside. The receptionist greeted him with a knowing nod, swiftly handing him a key card. Maya's breath hitched as they entered the elevator, the air thick with anticipation. As the doors closed, Alexander turned to her, his gaze burning into hers. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his lips just inches from hers. She swallowed hard, her body already answering before her lips did. "Don't stop." The words barely left her mouth before his lips crashed into hers. The world outside disappeared as his hands slid around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Their kiss was urgent, filled with longing, desire, and an unspoken promise. Maya's fingers tangled in his hair, her body pressed against the firm planes of his chest. Ding! The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. Alexander broke the kiss, his breathing ragged, his forehead resting against hers. "Come!" His voice was low, commanding, laced with hunger. Maya followed him down the hallway, her heart pounding. As they entered the suite, the door barely clicked shut before Alexander had her pinned against it. "You have no idea what you do to me," he murmured against her neck. Maya arched against him, heat pooling in her core. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the king-sized bed draped in silk sheets. Their clothes fell away, piece by piece, exposing heated skin and racing pulses. His lips traced a fiery path down her neck, her collarbone, her shoulders. Maya's nails dug into his back as his kisses grew more urgent. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, fitting together as if they had been made for each other. The room was filled with whispered names, soft gasps, and moans of pure ecstasy. Nothing existed beyond this moment, just them, lost in the depths of passion. Hours passed, but time felt irrelevant. They explored each other's bodies, learning every curve, every reaction. It wasn't just lust, it was something deeper. The kind of connection that went beyond skin, beyond touch. When they finally collapsed against each other, their bodies entwined, neither spoke. Alexander brushed a strand of hair from Maya's face, his thumb tracing her swollen lips. "I've never felt this way before," he admitted softly. Maya looked into his eyes, her own filled with something unspoken. "Neither have I." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was strange how something so sudden, so intense, could feel so... They had entered this night as strangers, but something had changed. They weren't just two people who had shared passion. They were two souls that had found each other in a chaotic world. And deep down, they both knew. This was just the beginning. He had been with many women before, gorgeous, sophisticated, and wealthy, but none had made him feel the way Maya did. With her, it was never about money, never about power. It was about something real. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, it mesmerized him. She saw him for who he was, not what he owned. And that terrified him, but in the most beautiful way. Maya, too, had fallen completely. At first, she thought their relationship was just a fleeting fantasy, something temporary, but Alexander shattered every expectation. He was kind, attentive, protective, a man who loved her, not just desired her. They spent nights talking about everything and nothing, lying under city lights, wrapped in each other's warmth. And with every shared whisper, every stolen kiss, Maya realized this was love. The kind of love she had dreamed of but never believed she would find. And one night, under a starlit sky, her life changed forever. The evening was perfect. Cool air, a gentle breeze, and a sky filled with shimmering stars. Alexander had planned it all, making sure every detail was just right. He wanted this night to be unforgettable. The private rooftop garden of his penthouse was transformed into a paradise. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the railings, casting a golden glow. Candles flickered along the marble pathway, leading to a table set for two. The scent of fresh roses filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of the city. A bottle of the finest red wine sat chilled in a silver ice bucket. Soft, instrumental music played in the background, adding to the magic of the night. Maya stepped onto the rooftop, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen anything so breathtaking. "Alexander," she whispered, turning to him in awe. He was already watching her, a soft smile on his lips. "Do you like it?" he asked, taking her hand. She nodded, completely speechless. "It's beautiful," she murmured, her eyes glistening with emotion. But the beauty of the setup was nothing compared to the way Alexander was looking at her. Like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. They enjoyed their dinner under the stars, sipping wine, lost in each other. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it always did. But tonight was different. Alexander's fingers tapped lightly against his glass, a sign of his nervousness. And for the first time in a long time, the billionaire CEO, the man who always had control, felt nervous, because tonight he was about to ask the most important question of his life. As the last notes of the music faded, Alexander reached into his pocket. Maya noticed the change in his demeanor. His usual confidence was replaced with something softer, more vulnerable. "Maya," he said, standing up and taking her hand. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes, something deep, raw, and unguarded. "I never believed in fate," he started, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Until the day I met you." Maya's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around his. "From the moment I saw you in that mall, something in me changed." He took a deep breath, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe in love, in forever." Maya's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. She wasn't prepared for this, and then he dropped to one knee. Maya gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Their clothes fell away, piece by piece, exposing heated skin and racing pulses. His lips traced a fiery path down her neck, her collarbone, her shoulders. Maya's nails dug into his back as his kisses grew more urgent. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, fitting together as if they'd been made for each other. The room was filled with whispered names, soft gasps, and moans of pure ecstasy. Nothing existed beyond this moment, just them, lost in the depths of passion. Hours passed, but time felt irrelevant. They explored each other's bodies, learning every curve, every reaction. It wasn't just lust, it was something deeper. The kind of connection that went beyond skin, beyond touch. When they finally collapsed against each other, their bodies entwined, neither spoke. Alexander brushed a strand of hair from Maya's face, his thumb tracing her swollen lips. "I've never felt this way before," he admitted softly. Maya looked into his eyes, her own filled with something unspoken. "Neither have I." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was strange how something so sudden, so intense, could feel so... They had entered this night as strangers, but something had changed. They weren't just two people who had shared passion. They were two souls that had found each other in a chaotic world. And deep down, they both knew. This was just the beginning. He had been with many women before, gorgeous, sophisticated, and wealthy, but none had made him feel the way Maya did. With her, it was never about money, never about power. It was about something real. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, it mesmerized him. She saw him for who he was, not what he owned, and that terrified him, but in the most beautiful way. Maya, too, had fallen completely. At first, she thought their relationship was just a fleeting fantasy, something temporary, but Alexander shattered every expectation. He was kind, attentive, protective, a man who loved her, not just desired her. They spent nights talking about everything and nothing, lying under city lights, wrapped in each other's warmth. And with every shared whisper, every stolen kiss, Maya realized this was love. The kind of love she had dreamed of but never believed she would find. And one night, under a starlit sky, her life changed forever. The evening was perfect. Cool air, a gentle breeze, and a sky filled with shimmering stars. Alexander had planned it all, making sure every detail was just right. He wanted this night to be unforgettable. The private rooftop garden of his penthouse was transformed into a paradise. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the railings, casting a golden glow. Candles flickered along the marble pathway, leading to a table set for two. The scent of fresh roses filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of the city. A bottle of the finest red wine sat chilled in a silver ice bucket. Soft, instrumental music played in the background, adding to the magic of the night. Maya stepped onto the rooftop, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen anything so breathtaking. "Alexander," she whispered, turning to him in awe. He was already watching her, a soft smile on his lips. "Do you like it?" he asked, taking her hand. She nodded, completely speechless. "It's beautiful," she murmured, her eyes glistening with emotion. But the beauty of the setup was nothing compared to the way Alexander was looking at her, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. They enjoyed their dinner under the stars, sipping wine, lost in each other. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it always did. But tonight was different. Alexander's fingers tapped lightly against his glass, a sign of his nervousness. And for the first time in a long time, the billionaire CEO, the man who always had control, felt nervous, because tonight he was about to ask the most important question of his life. As the last notes of the music faded, Alexander reached into his pocket. Maya noticed the change in his demeanor. His usual confidence was replaced with something softer, more vulnerable. "Maya," he said, standing up and taking her hand. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes, something deep, raw, and unguarded. "I never believed in fate," he started, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "until the day I met you." Maya's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around his. "From the moment I saw you in that mall, something in me changed." He took a deep breath, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "You make me want to be a better man. You make me believe in love, in forever." Maya's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. She wasn't prepared for this, and then he dropped to one knee. Maya gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Maya's heart raced as he cupped her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "You are my greatest treasure," he murmured before kissing her. The kiss was slow, intoxicating, sending waves of heat through her body. His hands traveled down her arms, then around her waist, pulling her against him. Maya's fingers tangled in his hair as she deepened the kiss, losing herself in the man who now belonged to her forever. The night unraveled in heated whispers, soft moans, and the rustling of silk sheets. Their bodies moved in perfect harmony, love flowing between them with every touch, every sigh, every heartbeat. This was more than passion. This was love in its purest, most intense form. When the morning sun bathed the room in golden light, Maya stirred, feeling the warmth of Alexander's body against hers. His arms were wrapped around her, holding her close, as if even in sleep he refused to let her go. She smiled, pressing a kiss to his bare chest. Alexander opened his eyes, a slow grin spreading across his lips. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." Maya blushed, tucking her head under his chin. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." He chuckled, flipping them over so she was beneath him, his gaze filled with love and mischief. "I think I like the sound of that." Their honeymoon was a dream. Weeks spent traveling through Europe, from the streets of Paris to the vineyards of Tuscany. They explored ancient castles, sailed across turquoise waters, and spent countless nights wrapped in each other's arms, whispering sweet nothings. But beyond the beauty of their travels, it was the simple moments that meant the most. The mornings when Alexander would wake her with soft kisses, the evenings spent laughing over wine, the way he always reached for her hand, no matter where they were. Returning home as husband and wife, they settled into a life that was nothing short of a fairy tale. Alexander made sure Maya was treated like royalty, ensuring she had everything she could ever want. But Maya didn't care for the wealth, the luxury. She only cared for him. Their days were filled with partnership and love, standing side by side as they built an empire together. Maya became more than just his wife. She became his strength. She attended board meetings, offered insight, and proved to everyone that she was more than a billionaire's wife. She was a queen. Nights were spent in the comfort of their bed, wrapped around each other, whispering secrets and dreams. Passion never faded. It only grew stronger. Alexander would often wake in the middle of the night just to watch her sleep, amazed by the fact that she was his love, his wife, his forever. And Maya? She had never felt safer, more loved, more cherished. Life was perfect. Too perfect. What they didn't know was that perfection never lasts forever. A storm was brewing in the distance, a test of love, faith, and betrayal. But for now, they were lost in the bliss of their love, unaware that soon their fairy tale would start to crumble, and when it did, it would change everything. Raindrops drummed relentlessly against the windows of Alexander's sleek black Aston Martin as he sped through the empty roads of New York. The city lights flickered in the distance, their glow blurred by the storm raging outside. It was late, far too late, but he had promised Maya he would be home for dinner. He glanced at his watch. 10:45 p.m. He cursed under his breath. Maya had called him hours ago, her voice laced with concern. "You work too much, Alex. Please come home early tonight." He had smiled at her worry, reassuring her, "I'll be there soon, my love." But work had swallowed him again. The demands of being a billionaire CEO never truly ceased. Still, Maya was his home, and tonight, more than anything, he just wanted to hold her. He tapped the gas pedal, eager to close the distance between them. The rain fell harder, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up. The roads were slick, the visibility poor, but Alexander was used to speed. He had driven through storms before. Then, out of nowhere, headlights, bright, blinding, rushing straight toward him. A deafening crash. The world spun. The force of the impact sent his car skidding across the wet pavement, spinning out of control before slamming into a concrete barrier. The sound of screeching tires and breaking bones filled the air, followed by an eerie silence. Alexander's vision blurred, his breath shallow. His body felt like it had been crushed under 1,000 weights. Pain shot through his ribs, his legs, his skull. He tried to move, but nothing responded. A sharp, metallic taste filled his mouth. Blood. His head lolled to the side, and through half-lidded eyes he saw shattered glass, bent steel, and the growing pool of crimson on his lap. His phone lay a few feet away, the screen cracked but still glowing. Maya's name flashed on the display. She was calling him, but he couldn't answer. Darkness swallowed him whole. Maya paced the living room, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., and there was still no sign of Alexander. She had called him 6 times. No answer. Her heart pounded with an unsettling fear. Something felt wrong. Then the phone rang. She snatched it up immediately. "Alex?" But it wasn't him. The voice on the other end was cold, distant. "Mrs. Carter, your husband has been in an accident. He's in critical condition. You need to come to St. Luke's Hospital immediately." The world around her stopped. The phone slipped from her hands. Her knees buckled, and a strangled sob escaped her lips. No, this can't be happening. Within minutes, she was in the back of her car, her driver speeding through the rain-soaked streets. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered prayers, begging the universe, "Please, don't take him from me." By the time she arrived at the hospital, her heart was in her throat. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air as she rushed through the hallways, searching for answers. A doctor approached her, his face grim. "Mrs. Carter, your husband sustained multiple fractures, broken ribs, a shattered leg, and a severe head injury. He lost a lot of blood. He's unconscious, but we managed to stabilize him for now. However, recovery will take months, and we don't know if there will be any long-term damage." The words hit her like a knife to the chest. "Can I see him?" she choked out. The doctor hesitated before nodding. "He's in the ICU. Please prepare yourself." Maya stepped into the dimly lit room, and the sight before her shattered her completely. Alexander lay motionless on the hospital bed, his face bruised and pale. Wires and tubes were attached to his body, the steady beep of the heart monitor, the only reassurance that he was still alive. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she rushed to his side, grabbing his hand, pressing it against her heart. "I'm here, Alex. I'm right here." He didn't respond. Her strong, confident husband, the man who held the world in his hands, was now fragile, broken. She bent down, pressing her lips to his forehead. "I love you. Please, come back to me." The only answer was the rhythmic beep of the machines. Maya refused to leave his side. Days turned into nights. Nights into weeks. She slept on the stiff hospital chair, her hand never letting go of his. She fed him through a straw when he could barely move. She whispered to him, telling him stories, singing to him, reminding him of their love, of their life together. But somewhere in the shadows, another presence loomed. A presence that would soon threaten to shatter everything Maya had fought for. And she never even saw it coming. The cold, sterile walls of the hospital had become Maya's new home. The soft hum of ventilators, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the faint scent of antiseptic filled the air. But none of it mattered to her. The only thing that mattered was the man lying on the hospital bed, the love of her life. For 2 months, Maya never left Alexander's side. She sat beside him, holding his hand, whispering words of encouragement. "You're strong, my love. You're going to get through this." Every day she reminded him of their love, of the life they had built together, of the promises they made. She fed him when he was too weak to lift a spoon. Each spoonful was filled with love, a silent prayer that he would heal. She wiped away the sweat on his brow when he battled through fevered nights. She massaged his stiff limbs, her gentle hands working tirelessly to ease his pain. Sleep became a distant memory. She refused to close her eyes for too long, afraid that if she did, something might happen to him. Dark circles formed under her eyes, but she didn't care. Her love was stronger than exhaustion. Day after day, night after night, she was there. The nurses watched in admiration. "She's an angel," they whispered. "A love like that is rare." Even the doctors were moved by her dedication. They had seen wives visit, sit for an hour, then leave. But Maya, she was different. She never left. One night, as she sat beside him, tracing slow circles on the back of his hand, she whispered, "Do you remember the first night we spent together?" Her voice was soft, filled with longing. "You told me I was the most beautiful thing you had ever seen. You said you'd never let me go." Tears welled up in her eyes as she kissed his hand. "So don't let go, Alex. Please, come back to me." Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Alexander began to show signs of improvement. His fingers twitched, his breathing grew steadier, his face regained color. Then, one morning after nearly 2 months, his eyelids fluttered open. Maya gasped, sitting up in an instant. "Alex!" Her voice was barely above a whisper. His deep blue eyes, hazy with confusion, met hers. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she clutched his hand. "You're awake," she choked out. His lips parted, voice hoarse. "Maya!" Relief crashed over her like a tidal wave. She sobbed, burying her face in his chest, feeling his heart beating beneath her cheek. He was alive. He was back. She looked up at him, brushing his hair from his forehead. "I never left you, Alex. Not for a second." He tried to speak, but she placed a gentle finger against his lips. "Shh. You need rest." For the first time in 2 months, Maya allowed herself to breathe. She had fought for him, suffered for him, sacrificed for him. Her love had been unwavering, and she believed with all her heart that their love had won. But what she didn't know was that her greatest battle was yet to come. A storm was brewing, one that her love alone might not be able to withstand. And soon, her heart would face the ultimate test. The days stretched long inside the hospital, each one blending into the next. Alexander Carter, once a man of power and control, now found himself confined to a bed, his body weak and his movements restricted. At first, Maya's presence had been his anchor, her love an unwavering force that held him together. But as the weeks passed, frustration seeped into his bones. The constant routine of medicines, physiotherapy, and endless hospital food became unbearable. He hated feeling helpless, dependent. He longed for excitement, for something, anything to remind him of the man he used to be. And then she arrived, Sophia Evans. She was young, beautiful, and dangerously captivating. A nurse with striking blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt even the coldest of hearts. Her presence was like a spark in the dullness of his recovery. Sophia had been assigned as his personal nurse, and from the very first moment Alexander noticed the way she looked at him, not as a patient, but as a man. It started subtly. A lingering touch when she adjusted his IV, a playful smirk when she fluffed his pillows, soft laughter that filled his ears when she leaned in close, whispering jokes only meant for him. At first, Alexander dismissed it. He was a married man, deeply loved by his wife. But as days passed, boredom and ego intertwined, pulling him into dangerous territory. Maya, exhausted from sleepless nights, often left the hospital for short breaks, just an hour or two to refresh herself. And in those stolen moments, Sophia made her move. "Mr. Carter, I must say, you don't look like a man who belongs in a hospital bed." She sat beside him, crossing her legs slowly, her skirt riding up just enough to reveal flawless skin. Alexander smirked, amused. "And what kind of man do I look like?" She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man who belongs in a penthouse suite, with a glass of whiskey in one hand and a woman in the other." His heart thumped, the words igniting something inside him, something dangerous. It had been months since he had felt desired, since he had felt like a man, not a patient. One evening, while Maya had stepped out, Sophia took things further. She stood by his bedside, checking his bandages, her fingers ghosting over his skin. Alexander inhaled sharply, feeling the warmth of her touch. "You're healing well," she murmured, her fingers tracing slow, lazy circles on his wrist. "It's a shame your wife hovers over you so much. A man like you needs freedom." His breath caught in his throat. He should have stopped her. He should have told her that Maya's love was all he needed. But he didn't. Instead, he let her fingers travel up his arm, let her lips hover just inches from his own. And then she kissed him. Soft, teasing, forbidden. His body tensed, his heart pounding wildly against his ribs. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel like a helpless man in a hospital bed. He felt wanted, desired, powerful. Sophia pulled away, her lips curling into a smirk. "Don't worry," she whispered. "It'll be our little secret." Alexander swallowed hard, staring at her as she sauntered away, her hips swaying with confidence. Guilt gnawed at him, but another emotion stirred deep within. A craving. He told himself it meant nothing. A moment of weakness, but Sophia wasn't done with him yet, and soon that single kiss would lead to something much, much worse. Maya had given everything, her love, her time, her soul, to Alexander's recovery. She had sacrificed sleep, barely eaten, and poured every ounce of energy into nursing him back to life. She never once thought of herself, because her heart only beat for him. But something had changed. At first, it was subtle. Alexander, who once reached for her hand even in his sleep, now pulled away. His usual warmth had been replaced by cold, clipped responses. "I'm tired, Maya," he would say when she tried to talk to him. He no longer looked at her the same way. The love in his blue eyes had dimmed. Maya told herself it was the stress of the accident, the medication, the long recovery. But her heart knew better. It was a woman's instinct, that gnawing feeling that something was wrong. She noticed how he no longer smiled when she walked in, how he stared off into the distance when she spoke, as if his mind was somewhere else, or with someone else. And then there were the stolen glances, not between them, but between Alexander and Sophia. Maya wasn't blind. She had seen the way the young blonde nurse hovered too close, the way her fingers lingered on his skin longer than necessary, the way she laughed at things that weren't even funny. At first, Maya tried to dismiss it. She had no reason to doubt Alexander. But then came the whispers, the nurses in the hallway, the looks of pity in their eyes. Poor woman. She doesn't even know. How can she be so blind? Maya felt the whispers stab into her heart like knives. Still, she refused to believe it. Not until she saw it with her own eyes. And then, one evening, she did. Maya had gone home for an hour, just enough time to shower and change into fresh clothes, but something deep inside her made her return sooner than usual. Her heels clicked softly against the hospital floor as she approached Alexander's room, carrying his favorite book, one she planned to read to him just like old times. She reached for the door handle and froze. Through the small glass window, she saw them. Sophia was leaning over Alexander, her fingers slowly adjusting his shirt, her lips just inches from his ear. Alexander didn't move away. Instead, he smirked. Something inside Maya shattered. She pushed the door open, her heart hammering in her chest. "What's going on here?" Sophia jerked back, but not fast enough. Not before Maya saw the guilt flash across Alexander's face. The silence was suffocating. Sophia recovered first, flashing a too-sweet smile. "Oh, Mrs. Carter, I was just helping your husband adjust his shirt." Her voice was smooth, dripping with artificial innocence. Maya's gaze darted between them, her stomach twisting in ways she couldn't explain. Sophia's hands had been too familiar, Alexander's smirk had been too knowing, and the tension in the room was too thick to ignore. Maya turned to Alexander, searching his face for the man she loved, for the man who had once adored her. "Alex?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, raw with the fear of what she might hear. He looked away. Her heart dropped. Sophia placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder, her fingers grazing his skin, as if Maya wasn't even there. And that was when Maya knew. The betrayal had already begun. The hospital room felt colder than ever. The air was thick with silence, suffocating, unbearable. Maya stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at the man she had given everything to. Alexander Carter, her husband, her love, her whole world. But tonight, he felt like a stranger. His blue eyes, once filled with warmth, were now distant, unreadable. The love that once burned so fiercely between them had dimmed, flickering like a dying flame. Maya swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she took a step forward. She had to ask. She had to hear it from him. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "You don't look at me the way you used to." Alexander stiffened. "I see it in your eyes, Alex." Her breath hitched as she forced the words out. "You love her, don't you?" The room stood still. She watched his jaw clench, his fingers tightening into fists at his sides. He didn't say a word. He didn't deny it. Maya felt something inside her shatter. The weight of his silence crashed down on her, confirming what she had feared all along. Her vision blurred with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of him. "Say it." Her voice trembled, but she stood tall, her chin lifted in defiance. "Say it to my face, Alex." He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. Guilt flickered in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to justify what he had done. Finally, he looked at her. The hesitation was brief, but it was there. A moment of doubt. A moment where maybe, just maybe, he regretted this. But then, he nodded. Maya sucked in a sharp breath, as if she had been stabbed. Her heart fractured, the pieces falling away, never to be whole again. She let out a broken laugh, shaking her head. "After everything we've been through, after everything I did for you." Her voice cracked, but she steadied herself. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, looking away. He couldn't even face her. And that hurt more than anything. She squared her shoulders, forcing herself to breathe. "If I no longer deserve to be your wife," she swallowed past the lump in her throat, "then divorce me." His head snapped up. Maya expected hesitation, regret, maybe even a desperate plea for her to stay. But instead, he exhaled and nodded. Without a second thought, Alexander Carter signed the divorce papers. Maya's breath hitched as she watched him press the pen to the paper, his signature sealing the end of their love story. No hesitation, no second thoughts, no remorse. She bit her lip, holding back the tears that threatened to spill. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, not in front of him. Clutching the divorce papers in her trembling hands, she turned around. And she walked away. Not because she wanted to, not because she was weak, but because she refused to beg for love that no longer belonged to her. Her heart was shattered, but her dignity remained intact. And as she stepped out of the hospital room, leaving behind the man who had once been her everything, she made a silent promise to herself. She would heal, she would survive, and one day she would love again. But Alexander, one day he would realize the biggest mistake of his life. And by then, it would be too late. The wedding was a spectacle, lavish, extravagant, the kind of affair only a billionaire could afford. The venue, an elite ballroom dripping with chandeliers and gold accents, was filled with high-profile guests, celebrities, and media personnel eager to capture the event. Alexander Carter, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, was marrying again. This time to the stunning, blue-eyed nurse, Sophia Evans. But something was missing. As he stood at the altar watching Sophia walk toward him in an elegant designer gown, he didn't feel the same rush of emotions he had felt when he married Maya. There was no flutter in his heart, no warmth in his chest, no deep, consuming love. Yet he ignored the gnawing emptiness inside him. He told himself this was a fresh start. Sophia smiled as she took his hands in hers, but there was something about that smile, something calculated, something that didn't quite reach her eyes. And still, when the priest asked, "Do you, Alexander Carter, take Sophia Evans to be your lawfully wedded wife?" He said, "I do." The applause was deafening, the flashes of cameras blinding, but deep inside, Alexander felt nothing. Their honeymoon in the Maldives was picture-perfect, glitz, glamour, and passion. But it lacked something Maya had given him so effortlessly: depth. Sophia was breathtaking, no doubt, but there was no warmth in her touch, no genuine love in her embrace, and Alexander, though he refused to admit it, felt the void growing with each passing day. 1 month later, a lavish penthouse, New York City. The golden lights of the city glittered beneath them as Alexander leaned back on the expensive leather couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Across from him, Sophia sat with a glass of wine, her silk robe slipping off one shoulder as she scrolled through her phone. She looked beautiful. But for the first time he realized she was just that, beautiful, nothing more, the warmth, the patience, the tenderness Maya had given him. Sophia lacked all of it. She was cold, demanding, distant. She didn't care about his long hours at work, didn't ask how his day was, didn't hold him when he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. All she cared about was their luxurious lifestyle. He had ignored the warning signs at first. Her obsession with designer clothes, her endless shopping sprees, her expensive tastes. But tonight, she didn't even bother hiding it. Swirling the wine in her glass, Sophia finally looked up and said the words that shattered everything. "Alex, I need your wealth." Alexander frowned, his grip tightening around his whiskey glass. "Excuse me?" She smirked, crossing her legs. "I didn't marry you for love, darling." His stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" His voice was dangerously low, But Sophia only laughed, as if his reaction amused her. "You're a smart man. Don't act surprised." She leaned back against the couch, her tone casual, almost bored. "I married you for your power, your name, your money. That's all this was ever about." The air left his lungs. He stared at her, hoping, praying, that this was some twisted joke. But the way she sipped her wine, completely unbothered, told him the cruel truth. This wasn't love. It never had been. Maya's face flashed in his mind. Her tired eyes, her soft smile, the way she'd spent sleepless nights by his hospital bed holding his hand, whispering words of love when he had been at his weakest. She had loved him, with everything she had. And what had he done? He had thrown her away for this, for a woman who now looked at him like he was nothing more than a bank account. A harsh, bitter laugh escaped his lips as the realization slammed into him. Regret crashed over him like a tidal wave, drowning him in its unforgiving depths. He had made the worst mistake of his life, and now he would have to live with it. The penthouse was silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, but the deafening, suffocating kind. Alexander Carter sat alone in the dimly lit living room, an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. The ice had melted long ago, just like his illusion of happiness. Sophia was gone for the night, off to another gala, another shopping spree, another meaningless event where she could show off his wealth as if it were her own. And for the first time since Maya walked away, he allowed himself to feel it. The regret, the loss, the unbearable weight of what he had done. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and ran a hand down his face. Then it happened. Memories of Maya hit him like a hurricane. The hospital room, the scent of antiseptic mixed with the soft lavender of her perfume, the way she had held his hand when he had been weak, whispering, "I'm here, Alex. I'm not going anywhere." His breath hitched. She had meant every word. She had stayed. Through the pain, through the fear, through the long nights of agony when he thought he wouldn't make it. She had been his strength. And how had he repaid her? By betraying her, by choosing excitement over loyalty, by mistaking lust for love. A sharp pain stabbed his chest. How could he have been so blind? He reached for his phone before he could stop himself, his fingers hovering over Maya's name. Would she even answer? With a deep breath he pressed call. The line rang. Once, twice. Then, a robotic voice filled his ears. "The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service." A cold realization settled over him. She was gone, not just from his life, but from his reach. She had erased him, and God, he deserved it. The next morning, he called his assistant. "Find out where Maya is." The man hesitated. "Sir, are you sure? I heard she—" He stopped himself. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. "Heard she what?" A pause, then, "She's doing well, sir. She started her own business. It's growing fast." Alexander exhaled, something unreadable twisting inside him. Maya had rebuilt herself. She hadn't crumbled. She hadn't wasted away in heartbreak like he had. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. She had moved on. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Carter, the ruthless, confident billionaire, felt truly powerless. He had lost her, and now there was no going back. The city skyline stretched before him, a dazzling sea of lights against the dark night. But to Alexander Carter, it all felt meaningless. He sat in the cold silence of his penthouse, a place once filled with laughter, love, and warmth. Now it was nothing more than walls and expensive furniture, a hollow prison of his own making. His fingers traced the edges of an old photograph, the only thing that still felt real in his world. It was a picture of Maya, her radiant smile, those deep, soulful eyes that once held nothing but love for him. A love he had thrown away. A bitter laugh escaped his lips as he whispered to himself, "I had it all, and I lost everything." The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him, suffocating, relentless. He had chased a fantasy only to wake up in a nightmare. Sophia was gone. She had walked out months ago, but not before draining him of millions. Lavish shopping sprees, luxury vacations, high-stake parties. She had taken and taken until there was nothing left to give. And then, just like that, she was gone. No final words, no remorse, not even a glance back. She had only loved his wealth. And when it was no longer enough, she had discarded him like a used commodity. But he couldn't blame her. No, the real betrayal had been his own. Maya had loved him when he had nothing but his broken body. She had wiped his sweat, held his hand, whispered strength into him when he had none left. She had been his light, and he had extinguished her love with his own hands. He let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Would she forgive him if he begged? Would she even look at him again? Or had he burned that bridge beyond repair? A part of him wanted to go to her, to fall to his knees, to tell her that he had been a fool, that he had been blind, that she had been the only real thing in his life. But another part of him knew the truth. Maya had moved on. She had rebuilt her life, stronger and more beautiful than ever, without him. And maybe that was his punishment, not losing his wealth, not being alone, but knowing that the only woman who ever truly loved him was now out of reach. He exhaled, tilting his head back against the couch. The whiskey burned his throat, but it was nothing compared to the fire of regret eating him alive. Alexander Carter, the once untouchable billionaire, was now nothing more than a broken man. And perhaps this was the price of betraying true love.